the BankTalk podcast, the show where we talk to leaders and experts from the community banking sector. Whether you are a current CEO or aspire to be one, this podcast will give you valuable insights and advice on how to run your financial institution better. Each episode features a different topic and a guest who shares their experience and knowledge with us. Tune in and learn something new with BankTalk podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Bank Talk. I'm Charlie Kelly, your host and partner at Remedy Consulting. Today, we're talking about commercial lending. Specifically, got a guest from Anthony Cole Training, who trains commercial lenders. So I thought we could have a pretty interesting conversation around what are they looking for? What makes a good one? What should you be looking for when you're hiring? Those types of things. So I think it should be a pretty interesting conversation. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Bank Talk. Today I have with me Jack Casel. Jack is a sales development expert from Anthony Cole Training. Jack, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Charlie, thanks for inviting me in. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you very much.
So Jack, we reached out to your group because there seems to be a need in the industry for not only how to hire, but how to train commercial lenders. And I think that commercial lending concept gets a little different the more remote the bank becomes. But you sent me a piece of material that you use, and I think it's sort of a peer review tool to analyze what a bank's commercial lending group looks like. Can you describe that? What are you using that tool for? Where did it come from? I really like the tool, and I'm just a huge fan of sort of peer analysis. So why don't we start there?
Hey, Charlie, great question. And just so you know that this tool is from a company that we have used for the last 30 years. We've been around for 30 years, and the company is called Objective Management Group. And they've developed this tool that helps you take a deeper dive into somebody's ability to find, qualify, disqualify, and get people to make a decision. Because let's face it, Charlie, when people are interviewing people, they look good on a resume, they come across great in the interview, but they still can't move the dial. And so there are things that get in the way. And as you're talking about the 21 core competencies assessment that we use to really run a diagnostics. Because Charlie, if something goes wrong with your car, you would take it to a mechanic and he or she would plug it into the computer and they'd figure out what's going on. It's this filter, it's this cylinder. They pop the hood. So in essence, that's what we're doing to help a bank figure out what's keeping your people, what's supporting or sabotaging their efforts to find and qualify business. And we break it down into 21 core competencies. There, as you can well imagine, we need to have certain competencies that everybody in a producer capacity, they got to hunt, they got to qualify, they got to reach decision makers, they got to sell value, they got to be consultative. And then we have the will to sell. And that comes down to looking at really 2 or 3 different things. Or how strongly do they want to be successful? What's their desire? What's their commitment? What are they willing to do when it gets uncomfortable? Do they own the outcome they've created? Are they going to be excuse makers? And then probably the most telling part is the sales DNA. And the DNA is simply, do they have a high need for approval? How quickly can they recover from rejection? What's their buy cycle? What's their, what we call head trash? And so this thing gives us an idea to figure out, okay, how sick is the patient? What do we need to do to help this person get better at their chosen profession? And then we show a comparison to all of the 2.5 million people that have taken this assessment, the top 10%, the bottom 10%. Then we compare it to other banks that have taken this assessment. Then we have your results. So, Charlie, as you well know, data is only good if it tells you a story. And so this tells us a story as to what's going on with the individual group and how can we help fix it.
Yeah, great. This tool really classifies the bank's current commercial lenders, right? So it sort of takes a portfolio of all the commercial lenders, or is it comparing Charlie against peers, or is it comparing the entire commercial lending team against peers within the groups?
Yeah, what we do is we can slice it as thin as they want to. We can do a commercial team. We can look at your insurance team, your wealth management team, your retail team. And we can all break them down into specific categories, but it is a composite of the group. Now,
okay.
If we move forward, Charlie, then the bank can get individual assessments on individual people, which takes that same information, but it's on an individual basis.
Great. Okay. Because I would think the value of something like that is probably, and again, we're not talking about hiring at this point. We're talking about the current folks on your team.
That is correct.
I would think the value of that is in any tool, Jack could tell me the mixture of what's important to my bank. Some of it's probably subjective. I may not agree with Jack that I want a heavy duty sales push from every person. And therefore, my idea might skew towards I need better training in soft skills, or I may need other training in just getting on the phone and having conversations. Maybe not a sales conversation, but let them know we're out here. Whatever those dynamics are, right? I would imagine there's a little bit of subjectiveness to how much CEO cares, or the head of the lending team, or the new accounts team, or whatever cares about that style and expertise within their organization.
Correct. Yeah, that's a very good point, because one of the things that, even though we are a Anthony Cole training group, we lead and coach and develop leaders as well as producers. We don't advocate hard, pushy sales stuff for really a couple reasons, Charlie. Number one, bankers became bankers because they want to be bankers. Now, this is not a shot at a profession, but if they wanted to be red meat eating, commission-based sales animals, they'd go sell insurance or sell cars.
No.
They're bankers because they want to be bankers. So what we do is help them have a better conversation. Now, we know that some things will get in their way, and that's why we take a snapshot to begin with to figure out what is getting in the way beyond the surfacey stuff that's keeping my people from having more success.
It's a great perspective. And let's face it, right? If that's the current team, it's not like you can lift and replace them, right? You're better off. You might be better off to train in their gaps than you would be to, like, you're not, just because Charlie gets a low score in some areas, it's not as easy as it sounds to just pick them up, fire them, and go find super salesperson or super commercial lender, because that person probably doesn't exist. So
yeah, we would never do that. That's not our job.
Right.
It's almost like to use an analogy, we've heard there's certain a newscast, we report, you decide.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is tell the people, this is what you're looking at. Okay, they're probably as good as they're going to get. Now, guess what? If they're a fine ambassador for your bank, they're doing a great job, and you want to keep them, my goodness, we will work with them. We have to give the analysis first in diagnostics to figure out if it's a medical analogy, how sick is the patient?
Sure, that's great. No, that's perfect. Well, okay, so let me jump to another question, and
Sure.
I don't know if it's an easy one or a hard one for you, but you walk into a room. You've been training for quite a few years. Let's use commercial lenders for now, right? You walk into a room of commercial lenders. You walk around. You give them the 5 minutes. I'm not saying you preach to them for 5 minutes. You go talk to them for 5 minutes. Can you, walking out of that type of a conversation, do you know what you're staring at? Like, could you say, "Hey, I know who the top producer is in this room," after I talk to 5 of them?
No, because you get fooled.
Okay.
I don't know how. Is this person successful because she's in the best market at the bank? Is this person unsuccessful because he has a bad leader? So there's many, many factors that go into us figuring out what's keeping this person. How come this person is successful and how come this person is not?
Okay.
And how we judge it is if, let's say that you have a bank in the middle of Missouri, okay, and you decide you're going to open a branch in downtown Chicago. Now, the truth, what the real proof is can I take that person that's a good producer in Missouri and I stick her in Chicago? Can she still be a good producer?
Yeah.
That's the key. Okay. So having those couple of minute conversations, I don't know how hard they want to work. I don't know what type of coaching they're getting from their leader. I don't know what their commitment is. What are they willing to do when it gets uncomfortable? Do they have a learner's mindset? All those things go into us figuring out how come this person is good. And because there's people think, well, geez, she's so gregarious and outgoing, she should be in sales. Well, that's not the litmus test. We've seen some very introverted people be very good as a banker. The litmus test isn't the look and how they sound. The litmus test is a bunch of other things that get well below the surface.
Okay, so you can't hit them with a Myers-Briggs personality test or something like that. And just
that's a great point. That stuff, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Caliper, they're all good at what they do, which is personality. But Charlie, personality does not sell business. It's an element, but I've seen some people with marvelous personalities that couldn't sell an ice cream cone to somebody in the middle of the desert. So they just haven't got the wherewithal.
Okay. And that's good. I mean, I think that's a good perspective. For folks who've listened to the podcast long enough, they know I've got a commercial banker that is supposed to be my representative of the bank. And I guess I would probably say I think that person could use some training, to say the least, right?
Yep.
Like don't hear from them very often. Just the things that I would like, we've always said all of us are in sales, whether you want to be or not, right?
Sure.
Part of that, I think, is reaching out once in a while.
Yep.
And I would say maybe this person has bigger fish to fry, but I would certainly think that you'd sit down once a quarter or once every 6 months and go, how's the business? You know what I mean? Like, what are you up to?
Yeah.
And in the 4 or 5 years I've had him as a banker, never had that conversation at all. I'm not calling them. They're not calling me.
Right.
So I would think that as you go into sales training, a good chunk of it is how often do you reach out? What are your customers comfortable with?
Sure.
All that stuff as well.
In part and parcel of that, Charlie, too, we work on the leadership part. Because for the most part, if somebody gets into a leadership position because they were good as a producer, right?
Right.
And so they get into a leadership position, but the thing they don't get is how to coach, how to set standards and hold people accountable, how to motivate.
Yeah,
And
how
so
to mentor, how to track, I would imagine
all those things.
Yep.
Yep. What are the factors? What are some of the things they need to do each week to be successful? So we start out with that piece first. We got to give them some leadership coaching and development. And then we bring in the producer side of things, because they will hear from us, probably a couple times a month, but they see that leader every day.
Oh, excellent.
And that leader is the one that's got to help drive the behavior change, because that's what we're trying to do.
Right. I suppose if the leader's on the road all the time, they're not in the office trying to mentor the folks that are, I got you. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. I think we're doing a good job with this. I want to talk a little bit about prospecting. And by prospecting, I would say prospecting in this world is not prospecting for a commercial lender prospecting for business. Prospecting is a bank looking for the next commercial lender. So has the concept changed in recent years about where to go find a commercial lender? So what is the Anthony Cole group training their banks on how to go find the next commercial lender?
Yep. And one of the things we advocate, if you're talking specifically how to find my next commercial lender, is we call it the ABCs of success. You always be connecting, because we were talking earlier, and you were talking to a couple of bank CEOs, and they found a guy that was doing a pretty good job producing, but he didn't come from a bank. Okay. And so a lot of times what I see a big problem is that we want to get the person with the banking chops, the banking expertise, and that's not always the case. So I would highly encourage people just to be looking for people that are willing to engage. They come across very pleasant but not pushy. They're willing to engage in a conversation. So all those things, that banking expertise doesn't always translate into success at a new bank. That's again why part of this, what we do is that we also have what we call a pre-hire assessment. That'll help people cut down on the swings and misses of hiring mistakes.
Okay, great. Let's spend a minute on that, because that was my next question. I'm assuming if you have a tool to analyze the current status of the bank, I would assume you must have something that says, try asking them these 10 things if you're about to hire. See how that comes out. So again, tell me about that a little bit. That is meant to be an individual tool then, right?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. Right.
And so even on the information on the existing team, everybody would fill out an assessment, about 120 questions that take them about 45, 50 minutes to finish. Very similar concept on the pre-hire. If somebody's interested in joining your bank, the first thing we would ask you to do is to give them the assessment, because that'll tell us if this person, if he does not have the sales wherewithal, then why do I want to commit resources within the bank to interview him if he's simply not going to pan out? And this assessment for the pre-hire is about a 96% accuracy. They'll come back and say, we recommend, worthy of consideration, and do not recommend. Those are the three categories.
This is sort of ask them these questions, and here's how the highest producers would answer them. I mean, is that sort of the dynamic around how the test got developed?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. Yep. You're hearing this, but high producers would normally have an answer like this or something along those lines. Yeah.
Yep. Sure. Exactly.
Okay. So that's good. I think you hit the nail on the head with at least the questions that I had regarding how do you hire the next one? Because
Mhm.
it would seem that regardless of whether you're pulling them within industry or outside the industry, the dynamics of the person or the way they answer the question are going to be super critical to whether you can train them into whatever your mantra is or your style or your culture or what have you, right, within the bank.
Correct. If they take the assessment and it comes back as worthy of consideration or recommend, we're telling the bank maybe.
Okay.
We're telling them that, okay, they can move the dial, but do they fit your culture? And that's
Oh,
what they got to figure out internally.
yeah, that's a great
Right.
perspective on it.
And part of this too, that a lot of mistakes that I see when banks are trying to hire people, they make the interview process way too comfortable.
Oh, sure. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because
Because it's
okay, we want to
human
bring this
nature,
guy
isn't it?
in. Yeah.
Right. It's
And
it's
so
human nature to
let's
not want to push their buttons right up front.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, let's say something like, "Why I don't think you're going to be a good fit." And do they fold and walk away? Or do they say, well, oh, how come you don't think I'm a good fit? Or if we say, hey, give us a couple of weeks and we'll get back with you. No, that doesn't work. Okay. I need to know, when will you be able to make a decision? And so all these things are good tells. So you got the assessment. You push them a little bit, give them some headwinds on the interview, because guess what? It's tough to get an appointment with somebody in your market. If they can't fight through a little bit of headwind on the interview, then you probably don't want them on your team.
We'll be right back.
Is your technology spend getting a little out of hand? Are you worried about making those big strategic moves because of those hefty vendor contracts? Or maybe you just feel like your technology is currently holding you back. In today's banking world, overspending on technology is a risk you just can't take. Going up against those major vendors on your own can be tough, expensive, and especially when the contracts are designed to benefit them. That's where Remedy can come in. Remedy Consulting helps our clients stay competitive and grow their business with the right technology, products, and their spending strategies. Not a Remedy client yet? Head on over to remedyconsult.net for a free review of your tech stack, spending, and contract terms. Even if you're not the perfect fit, you'll walk away with expert advice and confidence in your technology decisions. Check us out at remedyconsult.net or give us a call at 262-955-7776. Thanks for tuning in, and now let's get back to the episode.
because then they're just a customer service rep.
There you go. Well stated.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. One last question I'd like to ask you that I just can't get my head around to is there a common denominator when you walk in, you do your analysis, and you realize that I know what this commercial lending team looks like. If you could pick out the top two or three things that you're training on that you just feel, show up as pretty regular weaknesses,
Yeah.
what would they be? And again, I understand that test has 30 dynamics, right, or 50, or whatever it is. But what are the top two or three? Would you say?
Well, I would say if we look at the will to sell, it probably comes down to desire and commitment. How badly do they want to be successful, and what are they willing to do when it gets uncomfortable? The other thing that we find is probably there's really two other things, Charlie, that really keep people from having more success. Number one is we simply don't set the expectation for prospecting. And when people hear prospecting, I'm not talking about picking up the phone and a bunch of cold calling. I'm saying go to your existing customers and ask for introductions. During your social media, you go to social events. How many people do you figure out what do they need and how can we help them? And the other thing that we see why people aren't more successful is the leaders aren't coaching on a regular basis.
Ah, interesting.
It's like anything else. If you use a silly sports analogy, okay, they don't have a couple of hour practice throughout the week and then expect them to perform on the weekend. You got to put it through their paces.
Yeah, that's great. So let me just go back and ask you a sub question on the prospecting side. Do most of them track prospecting? I don't pretend to be an expert salesperson, but in the historical sales hunter gatherer world, right? The hunters always have a manager, or should have a manager, that says, "All right, tell me what's in the pipeline,"
Mhm.
right? And then based on what's in the pipeline, what's percentage of close? and then you kind of work that back, and at the end of it, you know what your lending prospects are for the month.
Gotcha.
So again, that's a little simple, but when you talk prospecting, which to me is pre-pipeline, right? It's even before you can say I got a call with Jack, and Jack said I'm going to need a loan in 3 months, right?
Mhm.
This is just me prospecting, me finding out who Jack's friends are, all those types of things.
Yep.
Where do most of these commercial teams start tracking? Do they all track? Give me just your 2 minutes on tracking leads or tracking prospecting.
Sure.
What have you.
Sure. Great question, Charlie. And you mentioned pipeline. That's a lagging indicator. Pipeline was a lagging indicator of what I've been doing 3 or 4 months ago. And so for leading indicators, and this is the measurement tool. Now, I heard something before. We got to be careful when we're measuring, Charlie, because when the measure becomes the mark, it ceases to be a good measure. And what I mean by that is if my boss expects me to make 15 outreaches a week, and if that's all he or she's concentrating on, I'll give them 15 outreaches, but doesn't mean I'm going to move the dial.
Right. That's
What we're
great
looking for,
perspective.
Charlie, is conversion ratios. How many outreaches did you make in a week? How many conversations did you have? How many meetings did you get? How many proposals did you send out? And how much business have you won? If people will track those 5 indicators each week without fail, their business is going to start skyrocketing.
Because at least you know what that pipeline looks like. And by when I say pipeline, everybody's got a different use for that term. But when I say pipeline, I'm saying what is leading up to close of business.
Yep.
Right. And so that funnel, right, as you think about it, is you're saying track multiple times before you get to a close. You got to know what's there, right?
Correct.
You can't just ignore it.
Correct.
Otherwise, you'll never sell anything. Right?
Yep. And too many times we get bloated pipelines. They just stuff stuff in there because, okay, I'm going to keep the boss happy. We want to see it tracking through. Now, here's a statistic, Charlie, that on average, it takes 16 attempts. If I was going to get a hold of Charlie Kelly, the CEO of ABC Bank, on average, I got to reach out to you 16 times before I get your attention.
Wow.
Yes. Wow is right. Here's the other number, 4. Most people give up after 4 attempts. And so, Charlie, the fortune is in the follow-up. We're trying to figure out, does your ability to pursue exceed their ability to ignore?
That's awesome. That is perfect. Right.
That's what they got to do.
Right. Well, so the 16 attempts, that's interesting because back in the old days, I thought the number was 7 to 8, right? And again, maybe that's changed with social media and other things, but it was sort of, they needed to see your material 7 to 8 times.
Yep.
For you to, so do those two correlate, the 16 to the 7?
Yeah, it's tougher now. Some are even saying it's more than that now.
Okay.
Because here's what we know: when people are interested in something, they're well into the buying process. They're well into the buying process because of all the information that's out there.
Oh, they can go get it on.
Yes.
They can Google it. Right?
Yep.
I got you.
And so if I show up and telling Charlie Kelly, the CEO of ABC Bank, how great and wonderful we are, he doesn't care. Your prospect is in one spot. He wants to get to someplace else, and can you help me get there?
Right.
So that's
and he needs a problem solved, and you can either solve it or not. I don't want to hear it. I got you. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that dynamic of how sales has changed, or even getting to know folks has changed over the past 10 years is a really interesting one as well, right? Like, are you doing social media campaigns, which is one side of the spectrum, or are you out there shaking hands and doing community events and those types of things? And I don't know that anybody knows the actual mix that it should be, but this concept of the buyers know a hell of a lot more than you think they do these days.
Yes, they do.
To get the info is a great one.
Yes, they do. Yep. And to your point, Charlie, it's all the above. We got to make phone calls. You got to send emails. You got to get on LinkedIn. You got to go social functions. You got to get introductions. To us, that's prospecting. Prospecting isn't picking up the phone and smiling and dialing. It's a part of it, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Jack, this has been great. I mean, I think you answered everything. If a CEO would say, hey, I just need to build my commercial lending area up, it sounds to me like you have a pretty good analytics approach to that, to make sure we know what we're starting with before we can tell you that answer. Anything else, though, that we missed there?
No, I think that's a good starting point. Our business is about 90% of our business is the community bank space.
Oh.
We do insurance companies and brokerage houses, but as a way of giving back, what we'd like to do is offer that analytics tool to any bank that wants to take a snapshot of their team. There's no cost, there's no obligation. All your team has to do is fill out a questionnaire. We'll compile the results and give you the information.
Okay. And that's kind of the same thing you do at your doctor's office.
Thank
right?
you.
I mean,
Great analogy.
I think of the fact that I go into my doctor's office and the first thing they do is tell you to fill out their survey of everything that's going on in your life, right? And I usually don't want to, but it's good for me. I mean, it's good for me to at least. It probably makes the doctor's time more efficient as well, right? But
it does.
At least he knows then if what the base problems are, which might be causing some of the symptoms I'm walking in there with.
Well, say, Charlie, you could be in sales, man. Come on.
Well, Jack, thank you for joining us today on BankTalk. It's been a pleasure and really informative.
Thank you very much, and I hope we can do it again, Charlie.
Okay, I really appreciate Jack's time. This is Charlie Kelly for BankTalk. Have a great day and keep on learning.
Thank you for listening to the BankTalk podcast brought to you by Remedy Consulting. The Anthony Cole Training Group would like to offer you and your team of producers a free assessment to better understand what is supporting or sabotaging your efforts to find, qualify, and win the business for your bank. There is no cost obligation. If you're interested, please contact Jack, our presenter today, at jack@anthonycoletraining.com. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next episode.